Hi, welcome to this guide about the best culture in the early modern era. This is a continuation of a series of guides where we've been talking about the best cultures in each of the eras. We have covered the ancient, classical, and medieval eras so far. Um, Sort of backing up, this is about 120 hours in this game where I've won a few times, at more than three times, I don't know the exact number, on the Humankind difficulty. Um, we only consider playing against the AI in these guides. And again, it's only for the Humankind difficulty. All the other difficulties, all of the learnings here apply, but if you play on lower difficulties, it really doesn't matter as much which culture you pick because you're going to have a big advantage over the AI and you'll be able to win easily regardless of which culture that you pick, just because you'll be able to play the game much better than the AI can. Now, we won't discuss the two scenarios. In the previous guides, we always had spoken about a couple of different scenarios, but the two scenarios are similar at this point that they're not really worth discussing. If you do want to go back to the sort of start of this series, get a bit of an overview of how difficulty works in this game, there's a link in the description below the like button to the first guide on the ancient era, which is a really good starting point if you're sort of following along. So in this guide, we'll first talk a little bit about the early modern era, and then we'll discuss each of the different cultures that you can pick from and their strengths and weaknesses, and we'll identify one of them as being one of the best cultures that you can actually pick across the entire game. Okay, let's first discuss the modern era overall. At this point in the game, you have made most of the choices that will actually win you the game in the long run, and it's about cementing your economic advantage over the AI and start to accelerate your scientific advantage as well. And the industrial era will be all about sort of the science advantage and doubling down on that. The AI is unlikely to attack you at this point because you will actually be much more powerful than them in terms of economy and the number of units that you could churn out, and they're actually likely to want to start alliances with you, which will be a nice way to just not have to think about them very much at all. You'll be quite far ahead of the AI at this point, and it won't really matter what kind of emblematic units or special units you actually have access to. Any of the units will do, and you'll be able to churn out way more of them at a way faster rate than the AI if you want to go to war with. So picking cultures based on units at this point in the game is probably not relevant anymore. Unless you're trying to sort of wipe out every other empire on the map, and even if you're trying to do that, war at this point in the game is probably not the most efficient way. Later in the game, you will have access to nukes that are very easy, and there's actually a game where that was our strategy that we won on the Humankind difficulty, where you can easily just wipe out cities turn after turn after turn, and you won't actually have to hold on to them because the city cap really starts to hold you back in terms of being able to take over more and more of the enemy cities. You can make enemies your subject or whatever it's called in this game, but they can break out of that later on in the game. And it doesn't really get you any yields or anything like that. Like, it's only really a way to make sure that the empire really can't do anything against you. So that's sort of the context that the early modern era is in. You'll want to just boost your industry so much that you can build any quarters, maybe even 3 or 4 quarters per turn in all of your cities, and you don't really have to worry about the AI. It's really just a question of how long the game will last at this point in the game. Okay, so now we'll talk about each of the cultures that are actually available in the early modern era. And we'll cover a few of them at a high level. We won't go and look at them in detail. The first one of those is sort of the militarist and expansionist cultures in the game. There's not much benefit from actually more territory at this point in the game and additional cities. You'll easily be able to win with the number of cities, maybe a few more than you have at the start of the early modern era, which is probably just converting some of the territory that you already have into cities. So the militarist and expansionist cultures like the Spanish here, the Poles, and the Ottomans are actually not really worth picking, because the benefits from picking them and being sort of a war-focused culture is not really that beneficial at this point in the game. Now, we'll cover the Venetians and the Dutch in a similar way. So they're the two merchant cultures that are available at this point in the game. Generally speaking, money is nice to have, but picking merchant cultures doesn't get you a lot more money than you can make anyway. Like, most of the money will come from traders and some of the infrastructure and wonders that you can build to boost your money. And you know, this +1 money per population in all cities is pretty weak. The VOC warehouse is nice, although you have to build it next to harbors. And the Venetians here, +1 per number of trade routes in the city or outpost, only counts the trade routes that are actually related to that city or outpost. And compared to all of the other bonuses and infrastructure that you can build around trade, this is pretty weak. And the Baghetti d'Artisti is also not particularly good, because there are very few tiles that actually produce money in the game. They're just luxury tiles. Okay, so you kind of don't need to worry too much about the merchant cultures or the militarist and expansionist cultures. Okay, we'll also cover the esthete cultures in a similar way. At this point in the game, influence is nice, but you're only really spending it on like civics and maybe adding a few more territories, which is, again, nice, but it's not going to make a huge difference, right? Like, adding one territory when you already have 20 or 30 or 40 territories is nowhere near as beneficial as adding your first few territories, right? Which means that influence is, you know, nice to have, but it's not really going to make or break the game for you. It's still a good way of earning lots of era stars, but not really, again, game breaking or anything like that. So the Edo-Japanese, the +1 influence per population is nice, but it's only going to get you like a few hundred, maybe, influence compared to probably the, you know, thousands of influence that you're actually making at this point in the game. The Terra is also not particularly good. The 5 influence per adjacent mountain is not very good, and the faith really doesn't matter anymore. At this point in the game, your religion probably is either wiped out or you know, is going to have expanded as far as it will, and you will have unlocked all of the tiers of the religion anyway and gotten all the tenets that you care about. So this Terra is really not going to make a huge difference for you. The sort of esthete culture here are the Ming. The reduction of cost enacting civics is nice, but again, civics not that impactful at this point in the game anymore, and just picking the few civics that really matter is much better than being able to enact more civics, because a lot of them don't really help you. They're like relevant to the game or are actively not really helpful. The Grand Tea House is nice because of the stability boost, but this is only really one additional, maybe 2 additional districts depending on other buildings that you've built, and again, the influence per district is, you know, it's nice, and can get you a lot of influence, but the benefits of influence are only marginal, and the +2 influence per adjacent district is also nice. Overall, the Ming are probably better than the Edo-Japanese, but because influence is not actually that impactful at this point in the game anymore, not really worth picking either of those cultures. Okay, now we're going to start dealing with cultures individually. The next one that I wanted to talk about are the Haudenosaunee. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. Let me know if I didn't, or if I did. This +1 food on exploitation is really good, especially if you already have a lot of farmers' quarters. So this can get you a lot of food in your cities. The Three Sisters plantation is okay. The 5 food per number of attached territories is not that good. Like a harbor will get you far more food than that. And the farmers per adjacent farmers quarter, food per adjacent farmers quarter is not like that big either, right? And the +1 farmer slot is kind of pretty basic. The other reason that any agrarian pick, other than the really, really good ones, basically happens as far as the cultures go that we've discussed so far in this series of guides, are not that really good, not that good to actually pick, because your cities can only grow at most at 1 population per turn. So massive food surpluses in a city don't really make that much of a difference. And then you actually have to find something to do for that population, so you end up building quarters anyway. And I actually found in a game where I was focused on just getting as much population as possible, I could never keep up and provide enough jobs like traders, researchers, etc., workers in the city to actually satisfy or be able to make use of all of the population that was available. That's why the Haudenosaunee of all the agrarian civs, the cultures, they're probably one of the better ones, but not really worth picking because food is not that impactful in this game. Okay, so now let's look at the Juseon. This Hall of Worthiness is not very good. The +3 science on tile producing science. There are not very many tiles in the game that produce science. There's the strategic resources, and there are a few other tiles here and there that you find, but this is not going to make a big impact in the game. The C1 is nicer, it provides a little bit of influence, and it's a decent science and science per adjacent research quarter boost, but it doesn't make that much of a difference. Now the +1 science per researcher is pretty nice, especially if you already have a lot of researchers in your city, but again, not a massive boost. Probably if the sort of culture that didn't exist, that we're going to pick didn't exist, this would be one of the recommended ones that I would say, just because it produces science, and science is really important to keep getting an edge over the other empires. But yeah, I would not recommend picking the Juseon. They're not going to make a massive difference to your game. So, if you are hating on all of these cultures, David, which one is actually good? Well, pretty easy. The Muggles are hands down probably one of the best cultures in the game of all the eras, especially considering that they appear in the early modern era. This Imperial Magnificence is an amazing trait. This basically gets your capital powered to 10,000, if not 15,000 per industry per turn easily, because you'll have a lot of territories that are within the sphere of influence of your capital, because you will actually be way ahead of most of your neighbors, and you have a lot of territories under your control anyway. So this is a really, really strong trait. It's probably one of the best traits in the game. And then the Jama Masjid, I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, but it is pretty good. The +3 industry per workers is nice, although I tend not to have that many workers in my cities anyway. And the +3 industry per adjacent makers quarter and +3 base industry is a nice bonus, and then you get all of your makers quarters bonuses as well on top of that. So this one is pretty good as well. So in summary, the Muggles are basically hands down the culture that you'll want to go for in the early modern era. They are by far the best culture in this game, and it's because of this Imperial Magnificence trait. And then sort of honorable mentions, although don't mention them too loudly, are the Juseon, who produce a nice bit of science. So yeah, there you have it. Thanks for watching, And until next time, bye.